We are going to get started with our first panel, which is Cohn and Post-Bankruptcy World, and I'd like to hand it over to Beth Kaeding.
Hello there. Staff wanted me to try this freestanding way of talking to you, so I think you can all hear me. Is that correct? Yep. Great. Thank you, Kate. Yes, I'm Beth Kaeding, and I am a member of the Northern Plains Resource Council Coal Task Force. And as many of you probably know, until just recently, we used to call this the Coal Tongue River Railroad Task Force, but because we had a really significant victory this year, we killed the Tongue River Railroad, we shortened their name. And not only did we kill the Tongue River Railroad, but because of that, the Otter Creek coal mine proposal is dead. And as Kate just mentioned, 5 of the 6 proposed ports on the West Coast for exporting coal are dead. The most important one was Gateway Pacific north of Seattle, which died this year because the Army Corps of Engineers recognized that the Lummi Nation Treaty fishing rights superseded this coal export terminal. So good for us for killing them. This year, we convinced, finally, WORC in Northern Plains and others convinced the Department of the Interior to take a pause in our coal leasing program in this nation, and there's an EIS being prepared about that program. And so we have had no new coal leases granted or coal mines permitted in Montana in the past year or so. And then finally, there's all those coal bankruptcies, which include Alpha and Peabody and Arch Coal here in the West. So with all that good news, some of you may be wondering why Northern Plains is having another coal panel at their annual meeting. Isn't it dead? Well, unfortunately, no. For one thing, those coal company bankruptcies simply mean that those corporations are given time to restructure their debt. Now, this is the American way. We're letting corporations that have made very bad financial decisions survive and pay pennies on the dollar to retire their obligations to other companies. What a system. Anyway, the U.S. coal companies that have declared bankruptcy are coming out of bankruptcy, and they are poised to start mining coal at a fast pace again, maybe. While many in coal country and around the nation want to believe that President Obama's war on coal is what set coal back on its backside and caused all the bankruptcies, that's just not the case. Coal has been and is continuing to struggle because of the fluctuating markets that have been brought about because of cheap natural gas, cheap and reliable renewable sources of energy, and weaker than expected demand for coal in Asia. While the Clean Power Plan has played a role in the U.S. power plant decisions to switch to other energy sources, the bottom line for these power plant switchovers is as it always is, it's cost. Coal is no longer the cheapest energy source available, but big coal doesn't want to believe that, and it's not ready to give up. So our panel today is going to talk to us, to explain to us what all these market shifts and restructuring programs mean for coal mining and our coal communities, because we do care about our coal communities. Our first speaker will be Dan Cohn, who many of us know because he's been on the WORC staff since 2014. When Dan joined the staff, he quickly became our resident expert on coal mining permits, coal reclamation, coal company bonding, and coal company bankruptcies lately. Dan has a degree in anthropology from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, and Dan will explain how our region's coal company financial situations and their export and domestic contracts play into what's going on, and then what's going on with coal prices. All of this will help paint the picture that what's going to happen for our region's coal markets, coal mines, and coal-dependent communities. And after Dan speaks, we are very pleased to have with us today Peter DeJesus, who is with the Western New York Area Labor Federation, which is part of the AFL-CIO. That organization was involved in the transition discussions around the closure of the Huntley Generating Station, which is a coal-fired power plant in Tonawanda, New York. In many ways, that station is very similar to our Colstrip, Montana situation. The coal plant in New York was a major employer in the community and was a huge part of the area's tax base. It was inconceivable to folks in New York that that plant would close. But the Western New York Area Labor Federation helped lead the community process where labor, community leaders, small business folks, and many others came together to craft a plan so that their community could deal with what was upon them. Peter has been a union member for 17 years and a union activist for the past 10. He has been a site diversity trainer, United Way co-chair, union steward, political and legislative chair for the Labor Federation. He currently serves as the president of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement and is the director of communications for the Western New York Area Labor Federation. And as an organizer, he is involved in many activities and actions that are designed to empower and educate workers in Western New York, as well as trying to inspire them to become community activists themselves. Does that sound familiar? Peter's going to explain what happened at the Huntley Generating Station, the lessons that their community learned by going through this community conversation process. And hopefully he's going to give us some advice so that we can see the same sort of progress here in Montana. So will you all please join me in welcoming Dan and Peter to our panel, to both Billings today. And Dan, I think you're up first. We're going to have questions in the end also, so please save your questions till then.
Good morning, everyone.
I think there's a button.
Test. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I didn't have to travel as far as Peter did since I live about 6 blocks that way. But thanks to Beth and the rest of the Northern Plains Coal Task Force for having me on this panel, and thanks to Peter for having traveled all the way from Western New York. I'm very excited to hear what he has to say, so I'll try to keep my presentation brief. We'll see if I succeed. Again, my name is Dan Cohn. I've been on the staff of the Western Organization of Resource Councils for 2.5 years, and primarily I track coal issues for WORC member groups. And today I've been asked to talk about coal in a post-bankruptcy world. And actually, as I was listening to Beth's opening remarks, I was kind of dismayed because she systematically hit almost every point I wanted to make this morning. So it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. Just want to see who's awake. No, in all seriousness, I think the best way to talk about coal in a post-bankruptcy world is to start with the pre-bankruptcy world, what companies were talking about, what happened to get them to bankruptcy, and then where things are headed now. So just by way of background, hopefully you can see this slide. There are a number of coal basins in our region. The most well-known is the Powder River Basin that spans Wyoming and southeastern Montana. There's also lignite in eastern Montana and western North Dakota, as well as higher quality bituminous coal in southwestern Wyoming and the rest of the southwest. I'll be focusing on Powder River Basin coal today because it produces 40% of all the coal in the country. Just around 40% comes out of the state of Wyoming alone. Montana's, I think, 6th or 5th in coal production in the country. But if you've ever been down there, I mean, if you live there, you have a sense of how big these operations are, pits stretching farther than the eye can see. So the major coal mines in the Powder River Basin, that's the PRB and the red, there's sort of 3 clusters. One of them is around Gillette, Wyoming, another's around Sheridan, Wyoming, and then there's a couple mines near Billings, and of course the Signal Peak mine is not on that map, but is a very important mine to folks in this room. So most of these mines, what they do is they mine coal and sell it to power plants to create electricity. And sometimes they export it overseas, but really only as prices allow. So the reason we're talking about a post-bankruptcy world today is that in the past 5 years or so, over 50 coal companies have filed for bankruptcy. Some actually filed multiple times at this point. And between August of 2015 and April of this year, the 3 largest companies in the country all filed for bankruptcy within 8 months of each other. And so those are Alpha Natural Resources, Arch Coal, and Peabody Energy. And none of these companies have any active operations in Montana, although, as we've heard a number of times already, Arch Coal was pushing the Otter Creek mine and the Tongue River Railroad until this organization killed them. So, why did this happen? Beth, like I said, was starting to address this. You hear a lot about how regulations and cheap natural gas are hurting the coal market. And make no mistake, these are both factors. Cheap natural gas has taken over coal's market share in the country's electricity production. And federal rules and regulations have required coal plants to clean up their pollution, which costs utility companies money to keep running their old dirty plants, so they've opted to shut them down in many cases. But what you don't regularly hear, and the point I want to emphasize for a moment, is that the coal industry's bankruptcies were really brought on by the hubris and optimism of coal company executives over the past 5 or 6 years. The sort of short story is that they took on a lot of debt at the top of the coal market. The bottom fell out, and they, couldn't pay back their debt, just like Beth said. So I apologize for this being a somewhat complicated chart, but I promise it helps make the point. The blue line there in the middle is the price of metallurgical coal, which is the sort of other part of coal that we don't really think about. It's the kind of coal that's used to make steel. There's not much of it out west, but there's a lot back east. The point here is that the price of met coal spiked between 2009 and 2011. This is an awkward angle, but that's the first part of the graph, 2009 to 2011. And that's when China became a major importer of coal. The country's demand just overwhelmed the domestic supplies and the supplies of Australia and Indonesia, which are other coal exporting countries. And so supply couldn't keep up, prices rose. But during that time, US companies were telling investors and telling each other and themselves that this was the new normal. And looking at this graph, we can see that that was not the case. After the peak, right around 2011, there's a long tail off between 2011 and 2015. And it was during the run-up in coal prices on the left-hand side of that graph that coal executives made big acquisitions of metallurgical coal companies. And those were largely debt-fueled, and they cost billions of dollars. And when you're looking at a graph that is shooting steeply up, you sort of get excited that it might go on that way for a long time. That was not the case. Met coal prices deflated as the Chinese economy slowed down because they stopped overbuilding their infrastructure as severely as they had been. And so when that happened, the earnings that the executives were counting on to pay back their debt just weren't there. And that's actually what these boxes are. I don't know if you can read them. On the left-hand side marks acquisitions, and on the right-hand side marks those same companies filing for bankruptcy. And so I think this is a really big part of the story, and I wanted to emphasize this real quick. They say hindsight is 20/20, and there's a couple of key quotes I wanted to share real quick. If you don't believe me, ask Wall Street financial analysts, and they'll tell you the same thing. So in 2011, Wall Street investment advisors really hyped up the met coal buying spree. And so this quote is talking about a deal where Alpha Natural Resources bought Massey Energy, which is a very infamous and evil coal company in Appalachia, bought them for $8.5 billion. And so at the time, the analyst said, in our view, this is a truly transformational deal for Alpha. As we wrote in a previous piece, we believe that a combined Alpha and Massey would be a must-own in the coal space. And you compare that optimism and headiness with this quote from March 2014, which really boils down to, in our opinion, the problem for US coal did not start with weak natural gas prices in 2012. Rather, it started the year before during the wave of mergers and acquisitions. Quote, in the 2 decades covering the mining industry, these were some of the most regrettable transactions we had ever seen. How's that for being frank? So bankruptcy. So many folks, like Beth mentioned, there's this conception that bankruptcy means the end of a company. And that is not primarily what happens. So in bankruptcy, you can liquidate, which means you chop up your company, sell off the assets, pay back your creditors, and the company no longer exists. What the coal companies have been trying to do is reorganize, and that means, you do the things on the screen here. You cut costs, you keep running your normal operations, and eventually you emerge as a new company. And usually what bankruptcy means either way is that investors in the company take a loss, but of course the investors, as I'm sure you know, pressure the company to cut other costs. And executives have been all too willing to do that in most cases. And in the case of the coal companies, they were brutal. Just to touch on this whole idea of cutting costs, in Alpha, for example, the executives of Alpha lobbied to shred the company's modest medical obligations that they owed to nearly 5,000 non-union workers, all in order to save a couple $1 million. And this was like $100 a month checks for folks who had sometimes lost life and limb working in the mines. So most Western mines are non-union. There are a significant number of Eastern mines that are union, and on that score, the executives also argued that the bankruptcy court should basically throw out the collective bargaining agreement they had struck with the miners' union in order to save $60 million. And at the same time, these same executives were arguing that they should pay themselves $12 million extra to stay on board throughout bankruptcy to prevent some catastrophe like, the company shutting down. So talk about corporate rating. They were successful on all 3 counts, and Alpha's now out of bankruptcy. And that's sort of where we're at. So Alpha and Arch, the 2 of the biggest, are out of bankruptcy, mostly through corporate rating. Peabody's still in bankruptcy, struggling to get out, slated to get out next year and early in the spring. There are other Montana coal companies who are hanging on and not quite in the same position as Peabody, Arch, and Alpha. But what I want to talk about now is how bankruptcy was able to change basically what Beth said, which was how much the company spent paying back their debt, but it didn't do a whole lot more for the company's profitability. Right. So on the domestic front, natural gas is still outcompeting coal, and renewables are displacing coal-fired power in a lot of electricity markets just because they're cheaper to run. And there haven't been new plans to build a coal plant in years. So this graph kind of captures that. In the brown on top, you have coal coming down. In the green, you have natural gas going up, and they kind of cross paths here in the last 18 months or so. And so I didn't choose that color green. That's the EIA's choice. We know that natural gas is not green energy. But I think the blue and the yellow are apt for wind and solar that are making an appearance in the bottom right-hand corner of the graph. So we also had a warm winter this year. And that, or well, last year, that meant that the utilities, the coal utilities that stocked up on coal for the winter didn't burn through their stockpiles, which led to a giant collapse in coal production in 2016. So this complicated chart shows 2013, 14, 15, and 16. And in the purple you have 2016. You see in the first bunch of months of the year, this giant, like it's almost off the bottom of the chart. So the warm winter reduced heating demand, the utilities didn't burn through their coal, so they didn't restock in the spring, and coal mines cut production by like 30% across the country, sometimes higher. And this is the biggest single drop in coal production this country's ever seen since record keeping began in 1949. So these trends aren't really going anywhere. Wind power is now the cheapest unsubsidized new source of electricity in the country, and natural gas prices have remained low for a long time. They would have to go fairly dramatically to bring on a lot of coal-fired electricity back into the market. And another exciting piece of news is that wind and solar prices keep dropping. On the export side, things don't really look much better. The future of Montana coal exports really depends on international coal prices, which I want to describe are controlled by Chinese domestic coal policy. Okay, now we're ready for this chart. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it in the back, but this is a chart of international coal prices. And it starts in like 2013 or some year like that on the left-hand side, and ends with yesterday on the right-hand side. As you can see, coal prices fell from a peak around 2013 down to the sort of nadir in late 2015. And they've actually rebounded significantly this year. Let's zoom in though. This is just the year 2016, that sort of narrow spike from the last graph. And you can actually see that it may have turned around earlier this month. So the point here, that yellow band is the kind of break-even range for Montana coal producers. That's what prices have to be for them to be able to export their coal, or think about exporting their coal. Above that, they can make a profit. Below that, they're not going to export. They can't make any money. And so it seems like coal prices have turned around. We'll see in the next couple of weeks and months where that goes. But the main thing controlling international prices right now, and the reason that I think they are going to continue to turn around and go down, is that the Chinese government is the main factor influencing international coal prices right now. As I mentioned earlier, they've overbuilt their infrastructure pretty significantly over the past 15, 20 years, especially the past 10, and that included coal mines. And so they were just pumping out a lot of coal, dropped the price, and that really hurt Chinese domestic coal producers who had funded their operations with debt. That sounds like a familiar story. It's one that the Chinese government is trying to avoid to stave off what would happen with a sort of financial crisis by over-leveraged state-owned enterprises. So China recently tried to bring down coal supply. They've actually been shutting thousands of mines, small mines, consolidating operations into bigger and more quote-unquote modernized, mechanized mines, trying to bring prices up to make sure that the domestic Chinese coal companies can pay back their debt. But that actually worked, right? They actually shut down enough mines, prices rose, but what that did was it incentivized utilities to start importing coal again, which means Chinese companies are not being paid for it, which is like the opposite of what they were trying to achieve. So the way they were doing this was by restricting how many days of the year you could actually mine coal as a Chinese coal company. It recently was only 9 months of the year. You have to furlough your workers or whatever for 3 months. And just in the past couple of weeks, they rolled that back and relaxed that limit back out to 11 months a year, which is expected to increase coal production, drop international prices, and take Montana coal exports out of the money, in my view. And I don't mean to be representing the sort of WORC network consensus view. I don't think any of us really know where things are going, but this is my best sense, which is why I wanted to share it. So this is the kind of world we're moving into. So the future for U.S. coal mines is no longer reliable, or nearly as reliable as it was. You know, the mines are going to mine coal when the price is right, and as their profitability waxes and wanes, you know, employment is going to wax and wane, and severance taxes are going to wax and wane, and local property taxes, well, you know, same goes for them. And from the couple of previous slides, the longer term trend really points towards waning longer term. So before I wrap up, I want to hit on one question, which is, what could a new presidential administration do about this? We know that the president-elect ran on a platform of putting miners back to work, or at least that was one of the planks. But I think when you look at the levers that are possible for the president to pull, there's really only one major one that can do a whole lot, and that is undoing the measures that protect the health and the safety of coal miners and the American people. So there are a lot of federal rules and initiatives that regulate air quality, protect clean water, ensure taxpayers get a fair return on federally owned coal, many of which we fought for. And many of these have actually gone into effect during the Obama administration. And because they were done by executive action rather than by acts of Congress, a new presidential administration could roll them back, and has in fact promised to do so. And so that will be a big blow to much of the work we've put in over the past number of years. But I don't think it is going to be enough on its own to bring the companies back to profitability, because there are a number of things that a new administration can't do. And this is that list. There's going to continue to be pressure on coal prices from natural gas and renewables. You know, even if the tax credits for renewables get rescinded, even if more natural gas pipelines get built. But utilities have really shifted away from building new coal plants because it just isn't the cheapest option anymore. Another thing a presidential administration can't do is change the geology of the coal in the ground. Geologically, western seams are not really flat. They actually dip in one direction or another, usually down, and the coal companies start mining the shallowest stuff first. So that means that operating costs only rise over the long term as diesel fuel goes up and down. You know, costs can change a little bit here and there on the margin, but what that does is it ensures that all margins for mining coal are going to be razor thin from here on out. On the export side, I think it would be a mistake to assume that any American president could change the Chinese government's agenda of protecting state-owned or partially state-owned enterprises. Can't change the foreign exchange rate, which I won't go into, and also can't decrease the distance between U.S. coal and Asian customers. There happens to be the world's biggest ocean in a way. So the bottom line is that coal is down but not out, and I thought Beth said it very well when she said that the not out part, that also means that coal companies are not giving up, which means that these conversations are still important and remaining vigilant is still important, regardless of the way a lot of these trends seem to be going. And just to end on a positive note, I want to show you this graph, another colorful, complicated graph. I want to underscore the point I just made. This shows projections from the U.S. Department of Energy's Energy Information Administration. These are projections between, the sort of the aughts and 2040 for what coal production is going to do in this country. And this is amazing, right? Because this shows 10 years of projections starting in 2006, 2007 up here, 2008 here, 2009, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The trend is really clear. The line is coming down, right? And so in 2015, that's the cyan color. EIA basically said coal production is going to be flat. And what this means is that coal is in trouble, right? And it's taken a while for the bureaucrats at the EIA to catch up. And so the last slide I will show is this one, which simplifies what we just saw. It just shows 2015 and 2016. And so for the first time in recent memory, or possibly ever, the EIA is saying the trajectory of the coal industry is pointed down over the long haul. Now, it's not zero next year, and it's not zero in 20 years, but it's on its way. And I think that kind of inevitability means that there's a whole host of new questions we need to be asking, and have already started asking about who's going to be hurt by that transition, and what do they care about, what do they think they need to get through it, which is why we have Peter here to address us next. Thank you.
Transition to Peter, and it was very interesting.
Morning. Bear with me. It seems that no matter how many times you do this, you still get nervous when you get up here. First of all, I'd like to thank Teresa and the entire staff for their hospitality. It's been an interesting last 2 days here in my tent. Good. I love my favorite Buffalo very much. So let me give you a little background about myself. Like I said, my name is Peter DeJesus. I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I have a little over 17 years labor career. Started at age 19 at General Motors facility. Put in 10 years there, and then when the economic downturn of the automotive industry started, took a buyout. Kind of laid low for about a year until I got to look for my wife that it was time to get back to work. And then I was fortunate to obtain a job in a specialty metals plant that was represented by the United Steelworkers. So in 4 years there, I went through their leadership development program. I was able to obtain a unit griever position, and that's where my activism really started. Like I said earlier, I was born and raised in Western New York. It's something that's, it's a place I love. It's a place I call home. I could have never imagined leaving it. Which makes this issue with the coal burning plant even more touchy, because this plant literally sits out about 5 miles outside of my house. So I not only live, but I work and play in this area. So to kind of give you an overview of the town, we have a fancy clicker and everything. Wow. All right. So the town of Tonawanda, where the Huntley plant resides. Tonawanda is also known for confluent stream. It actually has a population, according to the last 2010 census, of about 15,000 people. It is a very heavy industrial area. As you can see, it sits on the northern edge of the, I can't really read my own notes here. Sits on the northern edge of Erie County. The yellow dots that you're looking at are some of the large and small facilities that are in this area. So as you can see, it is very heavily populated. Some of the larger employers include the General Motors powertrain facility, the Goodyear Dunlop tire facility, the DuPont chemical facility, and a plethora of smaller mom and pop coke shops and things like that. So one of the largest actual revenue distributor would be the Huntley coal burning plant. To give you a little history on the Huntley facility, it's the Huntley generating station located in town Tonawanda was one of the few remaining coal-fired plants in New York State. It originally consisted of 6 units. They were placed into service between 1942 and 1958. Units 1 and 2 were retired in 2005. Units 3 and 4 were retired in 2007. The remaining 2 units, each about 218 megawatts, were placed into service around the late 50s. And an interesting point, that all the coal that was burned at the Huntley plant is sourced from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. So, Huntley, it has a huge economic impact on the town of Tonawanda. It roughly accounts for about close to $6 million in revenue to the town and other municipalities. Some of the largest receivers of that money would be the school district, which receives about $3 million from the pilot payment, which is a payment in lieu of taxes that was negotiated when the plant was constructed. The town itself gets about $2 million annually, and the county of Erie gets about $800,000 a year from the town of Tonawanda. So economically, the Huntley plant and the thought of this plant closing had huge consequences on the town itself. Now, I'm going to try to keep up with the slide. I Technology works sometimes. All right, so we're gonna go on to the next slide. Huntley's financial outlook. In 2014, there was a study that was commissioned to look at, and look into Huntley's economic outlook. And what they had found is what we had kind of had a feeling about for a long time, that Huntley wasn't making money. And we know that corporations in the US, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense for them. That's plain and simple, it's common sense. It wasn't economically feasible for them to continue to run this plant. Excuse me. So, like I said, this report was based on the capacity factor that Huntley had, and the capacity was declining for years. It was something that the writing was on the wall, it was something that couldn't be hidden. Numbers don't lie. The pilot payments that I stated earlier, that was directly tied to production of the Huntley plant. So as production went up, the payment in lieu of taxes went up. As production decreased, the payment that went to the school, the town, and the county decreased. That number had been steadily decreasing for years. Okay. So the question, when it was brought to us by one of our allied organizations, the Clean Air Coalition, was what are we going to do as a community to stop this, what seemed to be eventual closure of this plant, right? There was two options. We could sit back and wait, or we could be proactive and actually engage in conversation those who were going to get affected and try to minimize any effect that a potential closure could have. So we began to assemble what we call the Just Transition Coalition. Now, the term just transition was first promoted by Tony Mizaki, who was the actual founder of the workplace health and safety movement. Just transition theory is simple. When plants dangerous to our health and environment retire, there should be resources invested in making sure working men and women in local communities can not only survive with the closure of these facilities, but that they thrive in the long run. To me, this is a common sense theory. Communities should not be devastated on the closure of any manufacturing facility or coal-fired power plant. We have to make sure that not only the workers in the facility, but the community members and those who are going to be affected by its closing are taken care of. So we began to assemble just transition assemblies. Now, one of the key strategies we wanted to make sure in these assembling of these transition assemblies was that we wanted to make sure that the community's voice was heard. This was their community. They had been affected by this power plant for decades. The Huntley power plant sits on about 75% of the time along the waterfront. So, it was important for us to build a groundswell from the community. What were some of the key components of these just transition assemblies, and what were some of the strategies? Well, as you can see, first we wanted to share the results of the reports with the community members, everyone who was affected and anyone who wanted to be involved in it. It was important that they understood why the plant itself was closing. It was important that they understood we did not call for the closure of the plant, but yet the writing was on the wall, the numbers don't lie. So we needed them to understand that first and foremost. We had to get past that notion of, well, it's closing because of regulations, so on and so forth. The reality was, like I said earlier, it was not making money, so it did not make sense to the energy company. We wanted to brainstorm to make sure that I can't see this. There we go. Brainstorm who we will need to take care of. So we needed to identify who was going to be affected by the closure of this plant. The community members, the workers that work there, the people who provide services in the town, the teachers in the town who were going to be laid off because of the decrease in pilot payments. We needed to make sure that we were not being short-minded in our vision. Right? We knew that there was going to kind of be two parallel paths that had to be taken. We knew there was a short-term effect that could happen to the closing. There was going to be an immediate economic impact, and then we knew that there was going to be a long-term economic impact. And there's going to have to be a long-term vision as to redeveloping the site, cleaning the site, et cetera, et cetera. So we needed to make sure that our thinking process was visionary and that it was long-term. But when you're forming any any type of assembly or any type of team, you need to have a foundation or kind of guiding criteria, right? First and foremost, some of our guiding criteria is what we wanted to make sure that the schools are going to maintain funding for the schools, right? Like they make sure that teachers weren't losing their job and that kids were getting the best education, the best free public education that they could possibly get. We wanted to make sure that we protect the workers. That was key in assembling this transition. We needed to make sure that all parties involved understood that, workers have families, they have families they have to take care of, and we need to make sure that all right, real bright, real quick. But we need to make sure that the workers are protected. These are very highly skilled workers that are in these facilities. So we needed to make sure that, they transition. The average worker in Huntley plant had, I think, 15 to 17 years seniority. So it is very hard to take someone who's been doing something for that long and transition them into another position. There's complications that come up that arise with that, so you need to make sure that we address that. We needed to make sure that whatever was thought of filling the Huntley facility or filling the location that it currently sits, that it brought in good paying jobs and that it had access to opportunities and benefits. Another key ingredient was, like I said earlier, we needed to make sure that it reconnected the people to the waterfront. That is what the community wanted. That is something that we needed to make sure was a foundation in our ask that, when this Huntley plant is decommissioned, that these people have access to the waterfront. Like I said, it sits on 75% of the town water's waterfront. That's pretty amazing. So another guiding criteria was that we need to make sure that our vision is bold, right? We're going to do something, let's do it right. Let's make sure it's bold, it's visionary, it's something that's going to last. We need to make sure we whatever it was that we decided or that the community decided was going to be put into this location, that it was sustainable and that it could create some type of revenue for the town. Right? We understood that we're not going to be able to make up the full loss of revenue that comes from the decommissioning of this plant, but there has to be something that brings in some new revenue and adds to the tax base. We needed to protect the ratepayers, right? The people in the town of Tonawanda, which is a suburb of the city of Buffalo, moved to the suburbs for a reason. They moved there for the services, they moved there for the schools, they moved there because of the quality of life. We need to make sure that these people who moved there, many of them who were on fixed incomes, were not looking at a substantial tax increase due to the closure of this plant. We needed to make sure, first and foremost, that we improve the environment and health of those living in the community and the community itself. As many of you know, living next to a coal burning facility, there's challenges. There's plenty of health challenges there. When the possibility of the closure of Huntley came, it was something that was not new to us in Western New York. And large industries up and leaving and leaving communities in disarray is something that is very familiar to us. When you talk about the Bethlehem Steel, which is located in Lackawanna, New York, which is probably 10 minutes away from the city of Buffalo. At one point, it was the second largest steel producer in the world. It was so prevalent that it actually created the city of Lockport, or the city of Lackawanna. When this industry decided that it was going to close, it absolutely decimated the city of Lackawanna, who 50 years later is still not fully recovered from this. So this was something that we were not interested in. This is something that we did not want to repeat. This is not a part of history that we want to go through again. So we, this was a driving force to make sure that we were proactive in our approach and that we continue to move forward on discussion of what could potentially happen with this plant. With our members and with those who are affected, regardless of whether people believe that the plant is going to close or not. So what were some of the impacts, or the potential impacts at this time? Like I said earlier, the school district stands to lose about $3 million. Okay, that's a huge cut to any school district. What do those cuts mean? That cut means about 135 teachers were going to lose their jobs. That means that 3 schools in the district were going to close. Okay, that's when you talk about closing schools and losing funding, you're talking about a direct attack to education, to get education to services, so what these teachers can provide to the school district. The actual school district in the town of Tonawanda is one of our largest members. The Kenton School District employs probably about 400 or so teachers. So when the threat of this plant closing and the potential to take a $3 million hit arise, they made us aware of this and asked that we take action on this and that we be proactive in it. So the building of this coalition. Now, many times, we were well aware that when you get labor and environmental organization in a room, it was odd that we weren't screaming at each other, right? That, when we tell people that this, what we've done with the co-learning plan is something unique, they can't believe it, right? It's something that just does not happen across the state. We thoroughly believe that, you know, what the Clean Air Coalition was presenting to us was something that was drastic and needed immediate attention. You know, after all, we are a union organization. We represent about 150 different affiliated unions in Western New York, about 130,000 union members in Western New York. So we know about the work. What we didn't know was about the regulations and environmental cleanup, brownstone cleanup, things like that. That was not our specialty. Right? So we needed someone who knew about it, and thank God we had an organization like the Clean Air Coalition who knew about this stuff and was willing to work with us on this. To build any type of coalition, we thoroughly believe that you have to have a strong foundation, and that foundation has to be based on trust. It has to be based on real work and a deep understanding of what each individual organization does. Clean Air Coalition was one of those type of organizations. We, as an area labor federation, have to be very careful about what we get involved in. We have to make sure that it protects our membership and that it is something that our membership wants. At the end of the day, the affiliated unions are the ones that pay the bill. They pay my salary. Getting paid is a nice thing. I don't want to have to lose a paycheck and go home and have to tell my wife that. But so we were careful in creating this coalition. We did a number of different things. Some of the things that you can see in this slide would be we held a get out to vote voter registration campus together. Now, all these works that we did together were just to try to build that foundation, build that trust between the two organizations so that we can continue to work forward in the future. Now, don't kid yourself. We know that you know, we weren't always going to be on the same side of issues. That's the reality, right? We knew that there's going to be issues that we're on one side and that they might be on the other side. But we knew that if we built a strong enough relationship, a respectful relationship, that you know, we can respectfully disagree and respect each other's work. And when the time arose that we could work together, we would work together. So we did some unique things. Like I said, we did a get out to vote, canvassing areas, informing people about the situation and how they could also register to vote. We did a joint book drive with the Clean Air Coalition and Kenton School District, the Western New York Area Labor Federation, where we gave about 75,000, almost 80,000 books away for free to any kids who wanted to come in. So these are some of the different approaches we took to establishing this coalition and really building a fruitful relationship. And that relationship was going to be needed because in August of 2015, the inevitable happened. The Honey Power Plant said it was forced to make this decision, but it was no longer profitable, and it was time to close the facility. This was kind of the defining moment, right? This is when all our proactive work kind of paid off because we were not behind the eight ball. We were already about 2 years into our coalition building when this announcement came out. What you are seeing here is some of the direct actions that we took place and some of the interviews that happened after the announcement of the closure. To say that our affiliated unions and those in the community were happy that we kind of did not listen to the naysayers and we were proactive in our approach and actually continue to push forward with our coalition, brainstorming about the possible closure and what it could mean to the town was an understatement. You know, we had local politicians who, when we informed them of our fears of this plant closing, were not on board. They did not want to believe it. Right? No matter what we put in front of them, it did not make sense to them. No way was energy going to close this plant. Did not make sense. We had some of them who went behind our back, behind our coalition, and tried to be with the company's right. And the company fed them a line of BS. Told them what they wanted to hear, to be quite frank. This is to be expected. And then they come back to us and say, well, the company told me this, the company told me that. That's fine. That's fine. We didn't disengage that political leader. We kept them close to make sure that, we kept them on our message as close as possible. So being proactive was something that absolutely saved this community, and it was the fruit of our coalition. So through all that hard work, what were we able to accomplish? In 2016, thanks to our hard work, our lobbying, our working with community building, groundswell, lobbying frequently in Albany, which is New York State Capitol. It's a place that every time I went to, I just felt dirty when I left. That's another story. Through hard work and a lot of tough conversations, we were able to secure $30 million in a state fund established for coal burning power plant closures. 5 minutes. You're great at that. So this was the fruit of our hard work, right? This is something that is now written into legislation. This is something that will not go away. This is something that is accessible for every coal burning plant community in the state of New York. And this is directly tied to our efforts. This is from live, this is from making those phone calls, this is from knocking on doors, this is from meeting with politicians, even when they did not want to believe that the inevitable was going to happen. This is pushing our message and making sure that we stayed on our message, making sure that they understood that this was going to happen. Whether you believe it or not, the writing on the wall never don't lie. So what were some of our key learnings? Start early. Right? We wanted to make sure we engage as many people as possible that were going to be affected by this closure. You have to take time to build coalition relationships. They do not happen overnight. Trust is not something that is just given. It has to be earned, especially when you're dealing with organizations. I cannot understand that, understate that crucial point. You have to take time to build relationships. That's what organizers do. That's what many of us in this room do on a day-to-day basis. It is building that relationship and calling upon that relationship when it is needed. You have to be careful who you consider to include as a coalition partner. We were very thorough in protecting our message. Okay, we were not going to let anybody in who could danger our message or was not on the same planet as us when it came to the reality of what was going to happen at this power plant. This was not our first try at a church transition. We had actually attempted in 2013 to do the same thing. That coalition consisted of the Western New York Area Labor Federation, the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. It consisted of the United States Workers and another environmental group called the Sierra Club. That coalition blew apart very quick because one of the partners decided that they were going to demonstrate in front of the facility. That's a non-starter right there. That blew up the entire coalition. That set us back about another year and a half, trying to rebuild those relationships, trying to rebuild those trusts. So you have to protect your messaging. You have to protect the period. You have to continue dialogue with elected officials. Like it or not, they are the ones that are going to give us what we need. They are the ones that are going to be able to access the money. They're the ones that know how to find the money that we need to have these communities survive. You cannot disengage them because they do not want to listen, they do not believe what it is you're telling them. Because a lot of times, they won't. They really won't. You're talking about politicians, a lot of times they receive large funding from these organizations. The coal industry has a very large reach. That is something that cannot be understated. But you cannot disengage them because you never know which one of those political figures is actually going to be your message carrier. And at the end of the day, it was one who, when it was a New York State Assemblyman, who in the initial process did not agree with what we were doing. Thought it was absolutely crazy that we were trying to come together and actually secure funding for something that was never going to close. It was never going to close. Wanted nothing to do with it. And at the end of the day, he was our message carrier, and he was instrumental in securing this funding. So never disconnect your dialogue with elected officials. They are very important. And I can get in 1 minute, single snare, so we're gonna try to go forward. All right, sorry. So the work continues. Like I said, this is a two-step process. We have the short-term goals and the long-term goals. The short-term goals, we want to run a campaign to clean up the sites. We must, in Western New York, declare what the NRG facility is going to do in order for us to move forward. But we are not waiting for them to declare what they're going to do. We are being proactive like we always have been. We are conducting analysis of what can make money in the town. What are some of the town's visions, right? We actually engaged the University of Buffalo, University at Buffalo's architectural school to develop some unique ideas. Some of the ideas that came out of this were, a huge outdoor kind of entertainment facility. You had a green data center. There were some brilliant plans that came out of this. Another short-term goal is to continue to develop a community-driven vision. I cannot understand this. The community has to be the one that drives this vehicle. They have to push it forward. They are the ones that live in there, in this community. They have to deal with it, and they have dealt with it. And when you're once again, you're talking about dealing with politicians, it is the community that makes the politicians do what they want to do. One of the things that we noticed every time we went to that little dirty little place called Albany was, first question they asked you was, are you a constituent? Do you live in the district? Right? They want to know those type of things. So anytime that you're really trying to build a mass movement, it has to start from the ground up. It has to start from the community. Some of our long-term goals have been, obviously, for site redevelopment. We do not want this huge facility sitting on 75% of the waterfront to sit there and just vacate for decades. We're not interested in it. We've seen it. We do not want to repeat history as with the Bethlehem Steel Plant. We want to make sure that the town and school districts make up lost revenue. Now, we are not foolish. We know that it's not going to make up a $6 million hole in any budget, but we need to make sure that we're being creative to make up as much of that lost revenue as we possibly can. We need to make sure that the initial guiding criteria that we set are met. Those were our goals. That's what the community wanted. That's what we need to do. We cannot sell for anything less, and we will not sell for anything less when it comes to the power lines. So, with that, I am done. Thank you.